So this will probably be the last time I'm able to remind you about the binder check for Unit 3. So if that score, and you can look it up on Infinite Campus, what it is. If that score is not what you want, then all you really got to do is have your notes done. And they're all posted in Schoology. So are the videos if you want like the full experience. You can do them on your own paper. But if that's still not like 100%, I think you should consider losing it. And I would have to see the whole Unit 3 again because I don't remember what exactly each person was missing. But all you needed were 7 pages. So there's that. Anyway, that'll probably be the last time I have it in the slides. So just make sure you do that if you haven't already. And then today we did lesson 3, so hopefully you think it's a pretty easy unit so far. If not, please talk to me. We use these skills in every single unit moving forward. You see them over and over again in all your other math classes in high school, so it's really important. Like, if you're confused, ask questions. But you should be able to describe connections between a statement and function notation and the graph. So what's going on based on the function notation, where should it be in relation to each other? I think the activities we did today really hit that. Using function notation to represent a relationship between two quantities. One is always an input and one is always an output. One is always independent, the other one's always dependent. Usually the independent one is time, not all the time, but it's like hours, weeks, minutes, something that is time, or it could be like number of patties, like we saw in the example, number of books, something that's independent. Then using statements in function notation to sketch a graph. We did that twice today, so hopefully that's making sense. There's some that are like non-negotiables, so if they have an equal sign, they should for sure be a coordinate on your graph. And then there's some that just have to be higher or lower than the other. And that's about it. It should represent the situation clearly. All right, so any questions about the lecture today? Was everything pretty straightforward? All right, then we'll see with your score on this practice. 80% or higher is the goal. What I've been noticing is that people have been finishing them pretty fast, even in my other math lab, and then they just like sleep or do something. I mean, I told you, once you meet the goal, you could have free time. But because like the end of semester is near, maybe consider getting those grades up, and I can help you with that. Like you could do a retake in here if you want. You could do test corrections in here. You could go back and do some math lab activities. But that way you don't have to stay after school or go to Saturday and how to do that. Okay, but this is your point for the day. Any questions? And as always, if you're not reaching that goal, make sure you tell me. I'll delete a submission so that you can have another try. Okay, so number 1 on 4.03 practice, if you care to follow along. So function f gives the temperature in degrees Celsius, T hours after midnight. Choose the equation that represents the statement at 1:30 p.m. the temperature was 20 degrees Celsius. And notice that all the answers are in function notation. So we have to see how they're defining the input and how they're defining the output. And also they didn't explicitly say which is the input and output. So the two things being compared are temperature and hours. What should go on the x-axis? Okay, good. Which means that that goes on the x-axis. That should be in the parentheses, the hours. So, and notice like they're defining it as T hours after midnight. So if we want to know for the time frame of 1:30 p.m., how many hours after midnight is that? $13.5. Because, yeah, PM, not AM, so definitely not 1.5. These other ones are not in the right format, like. It's hours after midnight. We don't define that as like, this would be like literally a time, like that you read on your clock, like we don't put it. You say it was 13.5 hours, 13.5, not 13:30. So it would have to be this one. Questions on that? Okay. Any other questions from the time? Number 3. So on this one, we have same situation, but we're matching each statement with an equation or expression that represents a statement. So the temperature at 12 p.m. So 12 p.m. is that a temperature or is that like a time frame? So it should be in the parentheses. Because we're talking about time going in the parentheses and then temperature, I'll just spell out temperature since it's the same letter. But that's how your function notation should be. So how many hours after midnight is 12 p.m.? So midnight would actually be 12 a.m. So then 12 p.m. would be 12 hours after. Do any of these other options have an input of 12 other than this one? Then it would have to be this one. And it doesn't have an output, like we didn't say at 12 p.m. it says temperature, so that also kind of tells you it should be that way. Now, the temperature was the same. What's another word for the same? Equal, so we need to have an equal sign, so between these 3. But it was the same at 9 a.m. and at 4 p.m. And then keep in mind, it has to be hours after midnight. So how many hours after midnight is 9 a.m.? 9 hours, so I need an input of 9, so now we're between these 2. And then how many hours after midnight is 4 p.m.? Okay. Definitely not 4 hours after midnight, right? 4 p.m. 12 is 4 is 16. All right. Now it was warmer at 9 a.m. than at 6 a.m. So that indicates to me we're probably going to use an inequality. When it's warmer, is the temperature, well, I guess it doesn't really give us a temperature of anything. At 9 a.m., how many hours after midnight is that? At 6 a.m., how many hours after midnight is that? And if it's warmer at 9 a.m., should the inequality face the 9 or the 6? So yeah, and that matches this one exactly. And it's the only one with an inequality, so that also kind of helps. And then lastly, sometime after midnight, not a specific time, but sometime after midnight, the temperature was 24 degrees Celsius. So are they giving you an input or an output with that 24? They're giving me an output because we know input would be time in hours and they're giving us degrees in Celsius, and that's the temperature. So then it has to be not in the parentheses. And this one's the only one that you would have a T for. And then it's just T because they didn't specify the time. So that's all we know. The question on, yeah, I'll make sure the key is right, and it is. Questions on any other parts of this practice or any other practices? Okay, well, don't be shy, let me know. 80% or higher is the goal, so if you need another attempt, make sure you ask.